The Steam Next Fest doesn't have long to go for October 2023. Up until the 16th, you'll be able to try all of these upcoming strategy games for 2023 and 24. My name is JumboPixel. Let's take a look at 5 more brilliant games included in October's Steam Next Fest. First and foremost, Pioneers of Pagonia. The first item on my list, and actually it is releasing kind of soon, on the 14th of December 2023, gives you a ship with a whole load of dudes inside of it. Just look at them all. The basic premise here, in a similar vein to games like Kingdoms and many others, is that you are tasked ultimately with building a settlement. It's a colony survival settlement building game. It has a really nice and fluid system for placing down the buildings using these tiles that are fixed but also slightly flexible. The buildings themselves, as you would expect, have work zones that you can control, and more broadly, of course, will interact with the environment. Speaking of which, one of the points of difference that I really liked about Pioneers of Pagonia, alongside its relatively beautiful and vibrant world, is how these borders expand. Progressively and slowly over time, my workers march their way out, slowly reclaiming land as I grow this settlement, building things that you would expect like farms, primary resource extraction, all that good stuff. There is a very large UI up the top, and of course on the right-hand side of the screen, there's a series of missions that kind of coax you through the game, slowly, progressively, building up, exploring, expanding, and grabbing different things. The game itself boasts over 40 different buildings, and apparently 70 different types of goods. So resource management, supply chains, production is probably the other key part here. There is also a combat element involved, as well as apparently a multiplayer element coming to it too. In terms of the combat, it's perhaps not as wide-reaching, or at least my experience with it wasn't as wide-reaching as some of the other titles or some sort of games that are maybe operating in a similar genre. However, from defending against bandits and beasts, it does provide a nice addition, of course, as you grow technologically as well with things like weapons and toolsmiths. The villagers can bump into each other a little bit, so keep that in mind. It is, of course, going to be an early access title when it releases, and when you leave the demo, they show you all of this stuff, which I thought I would include at the end here to give a kind of vision for where Pioneers of Pagonia might be going after Next Fest. The second item on my list is Mars Tactics, which returns to the Steam Next Fest. It has a full release date, by the way, scheduled for sometime in 2024, and this, my friends, is a turn-based tactical game. It obviously has a very distinct style of graphics, and of course it leans into some of the rich history from other games in this kind of genre. Think the likes of XCOM, for example. When you first load up the demo, you're greeted with 4 different missions, though you do have to unlock them progressively. Not that that should be too much of a problem for you if you're interested in turn-based tactics. Corporate enforcers versus labor unions is the broader theme to the entire story that goes along with all of the missions. The labor unions in orange and the corporate enforcers, of course, looking slightly more evil in their blue, those capitalist overlords. Stepping aside from that story, though, one of the other things that I think sets Mars Tactics apart is inside of the actual world, which is, of course, Mars, there's a relative level of, say, dynamic environments. The environments themselves are explosive. This includes different terrain surfaces as well as human-constructed things on the map. So everything from the rocks, the level of the terrain, right up to the buildings and the built environment can, to a certain extent at least, be exploded, shot through, etc. Mars Tactics also offers quite an interesting suppression system, which can actually let you steal action points from the enemy. The next item on my list, in third, is CD2 Trap Master. This, my friends, is a great combination of a roguelike DECK builder, one of those card battling games, that also sets itself firmly in place as a tower defense game. Choose your mission once you've selected a card, and then you're met with a maybe what could be quite a familiar sort of tower defense level, right? The enemies spawn in one place, they track their way along a path, and you have to stop them from getting to the end. In this case, of course, the traps are placed by cards. Mana cost equivalent to enemies that you've slayed. There are some really fascinating and fun traps. This one that I've just placed down in particular, a personal favorite of mine, sending the enemies off into the drink. But there are all kinds on offer. Of course, you can see me placing this. Floor traps, spinning traps, spikes coming out of the wall. But really, of course, the variety here comes from the roguelike element. As you move through each level, you pick up of course, a card for your DECK. And then bam, you're straight back into what will inevitably be a slightly more challenging level. And through each one, as you progress, of course, the challenge and the threat ultimately of loss is very present, by the way, operating in real time. One of the things that I found a little bit difficult was the placement of certain traps, particularly those that go against the wall. It maybe just wasn't quite intuitively clicking to the wall, or something about repositioning it wasn't quite right. As you move through a bit more though, and start to get some more interesting traps and spikes coming out the side of the wall, like this dude who I spawned in, this fantastic gold swordsman who just goes absolutely ham on these strikingly familiar enemies. I just can't quite place where I've seen them before, but there's another game or an IP or something that uses characters very similar. Someone please let me know in the comments. Either way, as I've mentioned, the roguelike element is also accompanied by even more than just moving your way through, with random events adding different cards into your DECK or maybe giving you different abilities. There are different types of cards as well, not just traps to place, but also sort of slightly more magical ones that give you abilities, for example, across trap, skill, and power cards. Here I'm engaging with an event to sort of shop for one of those. If the cards in your hand are too expensive to play, you can always press R to discard your hand and get some new ones, or simply draw a new hand. Though bear in mind you only have a limited number to play, so you need to be careful with how you use that ability. Before we go any further, a quick interjection. Games like Songs of Silence were covered in my last Steam Next Fest video, and I'd recommend you pop back and check that out if you're looking for more, particularly real-time games like that, or maybe more 4X experiences like Solium Infernum. Regardless, there are 7 great picks over there for strategy and simulation. Now, back to this video. And we're slapping our way back into Celestial Empire, which is a city builder and a colony builder. And of course, as you see me placing down things like buildings here, you'll note that it feels similar to other titles, Age of Empires. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. It does do some things differently though, and I'd like to chat about them now, as well as, of course, my experience with it as I moved through. I think it's quite a neat city builder. The supply chains are quite intricate as well. Of course, buildings need to be near others to supply them. You can upgrade them as well using your research, which is also spent on the game's technology or development tree, right from the word go. Inside of it, you'll move your way through from simple things like markets and foresters through what, at least at the moment, seem to be the game's timeline out to things like brick roads, for example. The inbuilt tutorials were also really nice, and overall the city building mechanics were fairly fluid, fairly easy to use. They snapped to the grid quite nicely. The broader world sees you trading along the Silk Road, one of the key elements maybe that will set this game apart, and also the in-game events too, which lean in not just to building a bit of a story and providing some quests to this city or colony builder, real-time strategy game of course, but also into the game's slightly supernatural world. You see, this is of course a world of gods and demons. The gods bring blessings, miracles, kind of basically gifts to your city to allow your city to grow, your people to be happier, and then on the dark side, some sorrow can be brought into this, what I think is a fairly solid strategy game. And the final entry on my list, a goodie at the end, this is classified France 44. Set, of course, as you can probably imagine, by the 44 in its name during World War II. This, developed by Absolute Games and published by Team 17, is a turn-based combat game again. We're returning to one, we started with one, and we're finishing with one. Though, as you can tell, quite different from Mars Tactics, not just in its graphics, but also in a few other key ways. A couple of things that struck me while I was playing this game were the stealth mechanics that are really intricately laid out into this ambush system that basically lets you get an extra turn, providing that you can play the game in a slightly stealthy and of course undetected manner. One of the other things that I particularly enjoy is when you take on a cool shot like this one, it will play out on a slightly more sort of action cam, taking you away from that bird's eye view and bringing you down onto the ground with your dudes to see their terrible near misses from close range. It of course does have a broader strategic map and worldview where you'll set up your missions, engage with troop deployment and resources, and all of those wonderful things that you would expect inside of a turn-based strategy game, a turn-based combat game. And as I mentioned in the introduction, set of course during World War II. And that, my friends, brings us to the end of this video, and it will be my last video for the Steam Next Fest, October 2023. There are probably more gems to uncover. In fact, a couple of these games I got from suggestions from you in the comments, so please do share your games that I might have missed, that other people might enjoy, and I'll see you all next time.